You are going to die. That's how he said it. No hesitation, no preamble, just 5 words, clinical and sharp, like a knife to the gut. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses, hands folded on the folder with my name printed neatly across the top. Shot, Eleanor. Final report stage 4. Lungs, liver, lymph nodes, spreading fast. 6 months, maybe less. He said it like he'd said it before. Too many times, probably. But still, he couldn't look me in the eye for more than 3 seconds. Do you understand, Mrs. Hart? He asked gently. I nodded. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I was 74. Not young, but not gone. And yet, something about the way he said it, "You are going to die," made me feel like I had already vanished. I stared at the painting on the wall behind him. Mountains, snowy peaks, probably meant to be calming. They weren't. They reminded me how small we all are when the avalanche hits. He offered pamphlets. Of course he did. Support groups, home nurses, grief counselling. I took none of them. I stood up slowly, my bag already slung over my shoulder, and said, I think I'll take the long way home. He blinked. Do you want to call someone? No, I said, holding the door open. I'll handle it. Outside, the parking lot shimmered with heat. It was one of those cruelly beautiful afternoons, the kind that makes you feel like you should be sitting in a garden, not planning your exit. I walked down the hill toward the main road, ignoring the bus stop. I needed the air, the ache in my legs, the long silence between one step and the next. A little boy on a scooter flew past me laughing. A teenager honked at someone blocking the lane. And I just kept walking. Because something in me had already changed. I wasn't afraid of dying. Not really. What scared me was the way people would treat me once they knew. The pity. The fake compassion. The questions they'd pretend were for my comfort, but were really about what I'd leave behind. The house, the land, the money. David would show up with that stiff smile, trying to help. Marlene would call twice a day to check in, which really meant checking the calendar. And neither of them would ask what mattered most. How do I want to go? Who do I want to be before I'm gone? When I got home, I put the kettle on. 2 sugars, just like always. My hand didn't shake. Not once. I sat in the same armchair I'd folded laundry in for 30 years and stared at the fireplace. And then I reached for the hallway drawer. Inside was the original will, yellowed, quiet, and still naming David as the sole heir. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it under a stack of old newspapers and locked the drawer. Because the only thing more powerful than knowing you're going to die is knowing exactly what to do with the time that's left. I wasn't dying. I was preparing. And soon they'd realize this wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of something they never saw coming. They came on a Sunday. David had texted, not called. We'll stop by around 3. Marlene made something sweet. No mention of why. No, how are you? Just cake and obligation. They walked in without knocking, as always. Marlene's heels clicked across the hardwood like a metronome. Sharp, precise, timed. David followed, distracted, already looking toward the kitchen. I had the table set for 3. Teacups, napkins, everything in its place. Funny how even when preparing for disappointment, I still set out the good porcelain. Marlene handed me a plastic container, still warm. Peach cobbler, she said. Not too much sugar? She didn't ask if I still liked peach. I didn't remind her I never had. David poured tea. He asked about the garden. Marlene mentioned a friend who had just redone her kitchen. all white, with granite and that soft, close thing. I waited until the cups were full, until the silence between spoons clinking became too obvious to ignore. And then I said it. I have cancer. Stage 4. They say it's terminal. David froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. Marlene blinked twice, then set her cup down with delicate control. The silence was the longest one I've ever sat through. I expected a hand, a gasp, something human. Instead, Marlene asked, "Are you sure?" Not "I'm sorry," not "How can we help?" Just, "Are you sure?" David finally spoke, his voice low, careful. "What do the doctors say? Is there time?" 6 months, I said. Marlene nodded slowly. "That's a lot to think about." Another pause, another calculation. Then she looked up and asked, "Have you started organizing your things?" There it was. No mask. No delay. Just the question she'd been waiting to ask. And not one moment of grief before it came out. "I'm fine for now," I said. David shifted in his seat. "Well, we're happy to help. With the house. Bills? You shouldn't have to worry about all that." I smiled softly, a grandmother's smile, the kind that hides a knife. "I'm sure you are." They offered to clean out the spare room next time. They said they could bring a friend who's good with paperwork stuff. Marlene mentioned something about estate taxes. David asked if I still had the name of the old lawyer. Their tea went cold. Mine stayed warm. When they left, Marlene kissed my cheek. Her perfume lingered long after she was gone, like smoke, like warning. David said, "We'll talk more next week." I nodded. But I already knew there wouldn't be a next week, not the way they expected. Because that day, something shifted. Not in my lungs, in the way I saw them. They thought I was fading. They thought this was their moment. But they were wrong. This wasn't their moment. It was mine. They came more often. First Sundays, then Wednesdays. Then we were just passing by. Always with a smile. Always with a reason. Marlene brought pastries. David brought polite silence. Neither brought comfort. They asked about the house, not about my health. Marlene's eyes moved too much, scanning, judging. "This room feels crowded," she said. "You should clear things out." David stood quietly. He always let her speak first. They offered help, with bills, with sorting, with getting ahead of things. I thanked them. I said I'd think about it. I lied. They cleaned, unasked. Books were shifted, drawers slightly open, folders misaligned. I placed a strand of my hair in the will folder. 3 days later, it was gone. They were careful, but not careful enough. I listened. I watched. Marlene's kindness was too sweet. David's silence too long. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll make sure everything's taken care of." Everything. They left with smiles. But I saw the timing, the way Marlene glanced at the hallway, the way David touched the thermostat like it was his. I counted their pauses, measured their words. They weren't visiting me. They were circling what I'd leave behind. And they thought I didn't know. But I knew. I just wasn't finished yet. Marlene smiled like someone running for office. Polished, practiced, painless. She showed up with flowers, store-bought, bright. Not the kind I liked. "I thought these would cheer you up," she said. I didn't need cheering. I needed honesty. She started showing up in the mornings. Early. Too early. "Just thought I'd bring you coffee," she said. I already had some. She placed hers beside mine anyway. David followed her. Quiet, as always. Distracted. Heavy with guilt. Or maybe calculation. He asked about the TV bill. "Is it in your name, or—" He let the sentence hang. I didn't catch it. On purpose. They offered to clean. Again. I know paperwork can get overwhelming, Marlene said. I could help sort the important stuff. I nodded. I smiled. I did nothing. Later that day, I saw her at the hallway drawer, the one with my mother's documents, the one she never had a reason to open. She pretended to be looking for tissues. I left a note behind the top folder. Just one line. I see you. Next day, it was gone. She brought soup next visit. Homemade, she claimed. She watched every spoonful I didn't take, watched my hands, my pace, my eyes. She wasn't measuring concern. She was measuring decline. David asked how I slept. Marlene asked how I really slept. Their words were soft, but their questions were sharp. They were smiling more, touching more, asking more, but never. Are you okay? Are you scared? Do you need someone? Just, do you still pay property tax quarterly? Is the title in your maiden name? I noticed they never looked at the family photos anymore. They looked past them, through them, to what was behind them. One day, I asked Marlene if she wanted to take anything home, a test. She hesitated, then said, "No, not yet." Yet. She helped me to bed that night, tucked in the blanket too tight, kissed me on the forehead. Her breath smelled sweet, fake, like syrup covering something rotten. "You know we love you," she whispered. I opened my eyes, held her stare. "I know," I said. She smiled again, too wide, and as she turned to leave, I saw it. That flicker in her face. The part where the mask slipped. Just for a second. She wasn't worried. She was waiting. But I was too. And I had waited longer. Because she thought her smile made her clever. But mine meant I had already won. They thought I was slowing down. They thought I was fading. They thought they had time. They didn't. The day after Marlene accidentally opened my drawer, I made 2 phone calls, one to my lawyer, one to my bank. Both answered on the first ring. It felt good, being heard. I hadn't spoken to Martin, my lawyer, in years. He handled Tom's will, and my father's estate before that. Quiet, loyal, more spine than most men I've known. "I need to update some things," I said. He didn't ask why. He just said, "When?" 2 days later, I took a cab downtown. Didn't tell anyone, didn't leave a note. Marlene texted while I was gone. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart? Do you want me to drop by later?" I smiled. Not today. At Martin's office, I signed 5 documents. One removed David as executor. Another rewrote the will. The third moved the deed into a trust. The fourth rerouted my accounts. The fifth left everything I owned, every cent, every acre, every memory, to a foundation that feeds women like me who are forgotten too early. "Do you want them notified?" Martin asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let them keep smiling." He grinned, a rare thing for him. That night, I sat at my desk, took out a fresh sheet of paper. I began writing a letter. "Dear David, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed you thought I'd be too tired to notice. I raised you to be better. But since you've forgotten who I am, let me remind you." The next morning, Marlene arrived with blueberry muffins. "Felt like baking," she chirped. She placed them on the counter like an offering. "You've done so much for us," she added. "United States?" Like I was already theirs. I thanked her, told her they smelled lovely, and while she checked the hallway again, subtle but not enough, I sipped my tea and mentally checked off another box. Checkmark, trust filed. Checkmark. Executor, changed, checkmark, goodbye letter, sealed. They still think I'm sleeping through life, but I'm not sleeping, I'm preparing. Let them think the paperwork is where I left it. Let them think they're in the will. Let them rehearse the fake tears, the rehearsed sorrow, the quiet greed. Let them keep circling the safe like vultures, because one day soon, the door will open, and inside won't be what they expect. It will be everything I chose, and nothing they deserved. Her name was Ava. She was 27, maybe 28, young enough to still believe in people, old enough to see when they're lying. She came on a Wednesday, assigned by the hospice program. Just once a week, they said, for now. I didn't expect much, just another body in a uniform, but I was wrong. She walked in quietly. No perfume, no clipboard, just warm eyes and a beat-up leather bag. She didn't look around the room like Marlene, didn't scan for valuables, didn't glance at the hallway or the safe. She looked at me. "Hi, Eleanor," she said. "Do you want me to sit with you a while, or would you rather be alone?" No one had asked me that in months. She made tea without asking what kind I liked, and somehow got it right. Strong. No sugar, splash of milk. "Lucky guess," she said when I raised an eyebrow. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like care. She didn't ask about my will. She asked what I used to do before retirement. I told her about teaching literature to kids who hated books, about how I met Tom in the university library, reaching for the same copy of Pride and Prejudice. She laughed. Not politely, genuinely. When was the last time someone laughed in this house and didn't mean to impress? "I'll bet you were a tough teacher," she said. "I was fair," I replied. "And funny, when they deserved it." She grinned. "You're still funny." I hadn't smiled that way in weeks. She came every week after that, always early, always gentle, always listening. She brought books, old ones, tattered edges, notes in the margins. One day she left me a copy of The Bell Jar. "Dark choice," I said. She winked. "You strike me as someone who prefers honesty to comfort." She was right. One night, she helped me into bed. I was weaker that day. My legs didn't want to hold me. She tucked the blanket around my shoulders and sat beside me for a moment. "You don't seem scared," she said softly. "I'm not scared of dying," I told her. "I'm scared of being remembered wrongly." She looked at me like she understood, and then she said something that broke me a little. "I'll remember you right." That night, I cried. Not because I was sad, because someone saw me, truly, not as a burden, not as a bank account, not as an inconvenience waiting to disappear. Just me. When David came the next day, I told him about Ava. He barely looked up from his phone. "That's nice," he said. "Does she know about your, you know, paperwork stuff?" I stared at him. He didn't even blink. "Ava brought me soup the next visit, homemade, real, not from a carton like Marlene's." She stayed late that night. We talked about poetry, Sylvia Plath, Mary Oliver, Emily Dickinson. When she left, I whispered something. "Everything's already changed," I said. She turned at the door. "Good," she replied. "Then let them catch up." Ava didn't want anything from me, and that's what made me want to give her something. Not money, not jewelry, just the truth. So I started writing it down. Everything. What they said, what they did, what they didn't do. Not for revenge, for clarity. Because one day someone will ask what happened here, and I want the answer to exist somewhere beyond silence. Ava's hand was warm, her tea always hot, her smile real. And for the first time in months, I felt safe in my own home. David and Marlene still came, still smiled, still asked careful questions. But now, I had someone on my side, and she wasn't wearing a smile for show. It took 3 tries. The first version was too angry, the second too soft. The third, just enough fire to leave a mark. I sat at my writing desk, window open, sunlight on my hands. Ava was humming quietly in the kitchen. It felt almost peaceful. If I ignored the ache in my bones and the heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with illness, I chose my thickest paper, the good pen, the same one I used to write birthday cards when David was still young enough to care. Dear David, not my sweet boy, not to my loving son, just David, because that's who he became, not a son, just a man I used to love without condition. I started at the beginning, the diagnosis, the quiet room, the sterile smell of endings, how I walked home alone, past people laughing in cafes, children playing in the park, while my own child didn't pick up the phone that day. I didn't blame him at first. I gave it time. I gave him time. But he didn't give it back. I wrote about my hand, the same hand that once wiped his tears, held him during storms, held Tom when he died, held this family together for too long. Now it shook when I reached for the kettle, and no one offered to hold it. I wrote about the first time I saw the change, not in his face, but in how quickly he looked at the hallway, how Marlene lingered near the cabinet, how her voice softened only when she said the word estate. I wrote about the hair in the will folder, gone the next day, the vase that moved, the missing receipt, the pressure to get ahead of things. You stopped visiting because you missed me. You started visiting because I was dying. I told him that hurt more than the diagnosis, because death comes for all of us. But betrayal, that comes from choice. I told him about Ava, the way she brought me books, not brochures, tea, not pity, time, not questions. She sat beside me while I slept. She adjusted my pillows without needing a thank you. She listened to silence. I wrote, if you had shown me even half the kindness she did, your name would still be on the deed. Then I told him about the paperwork. The house is gone. Not sold, gifted. The accounts are emptied, but not lost. They've gone to hands that will feed others, shelter others, hold others the way you stopped holding me. I told him about the safe, the files, the locks he'll never guess, the letters he'll read too late. I ended the letter with this. You thought I was weak. You treated me like I was already gone. But I watched everything, remember everything. And now? I leave everything to someone who never asked for anything at all. I sealed the letter in a brown envelope, thick, heavy, weighted with every second of silence he gave me. I placed one copy in the fireproof box, another with Martin, my lawyer, a third in the drawer Marlene never thinks to check. That evening they dropped by. David asked how I was feeling. Marlene brought a scarf I might like to be buried in. I nodded, took the scarf, folded it slowly, and said nothing, because the words were already written, waiting. For a moment they'll never see coming. Let them smile now, let them feel safe, because when they finally open the letter, they'll realize I didn't die quietly. I planned my ending louder than they ever imagined. It happened on a Thursday. The rain had just stopped. Ava was humming softly in the hallway. I was in my chair by the window, wrapped in my blue blanket, my tea still warm on the table. I didn't make a sound. Not a gasp, not a cry, not a goodbye. I just closed my eyes and didn't open them again. Ava found me first. She touched my shoulder, gently, as if not to wake me. Then she called Martin, not David, not Marlene, because she knew what I wanted. Martin arrived within the hour, with the envelope, with the documents, with the plan. They called David that afternoon. He didn't answer. Marlene called back instead. Should we come now? She asked. Martin replied, It's done. She's gone. There was a pause. Then, so, when do we meet about the will? They came the next day. Black clothes, dark glasses, no tears. David tried to look solemn. Marlene wore pearls. She hugged people like she was hosting something. At the funeral, they stood in front, closest to the casket, but not to me. Ava sat quietly in the second row, hands folded, eyes steady. They gave speeches. David said I was strong. Marlene called me elegant. Neither used the word mother or love. They didn't cry, but they looked down often, practicing grief for the photos. I was already gone, but I watched it all, somewhere beyond the casket, beyond the silence. And I waited, because the real moment hadn't come yet. That came 2 days later, in Martin's office, just the three of them, David, Marlene, and the man holding my final words. They sat down like royalty. Marlene crossed her legs. David leaned back in the chair. They smiled. Martin opened the envelope. "Before I read the terms," he said, "your mother left something for you." A letter. He slid the paper across the table. Thick, heavy, signed with my name. David picked it up. He read it silently, line by line, word by word. His hands began to shake. Marlene leaned over his shoulder. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer, because now he knew. I gave them nothing. No house, no savings, no land, no keepsakes. Just the truth, on paper. Unforgiving, undeniable. Martin cleared his throat. "She donated the entire estate," he said. David blinked. "To who?" he asked. "To a foundation that feeds women who've been abandoned by their families?" Silence. Marlene stood up. Fast. Too fast. "This has to be illegal." "It's not," Martin replied. "She was of sound mind, clear intent. Every document is signed and witnessed." David said nothing. He stared at the desk, at the letter, at the part that said, "I leave you only the weight of your choices." They walked out with nothing. No keys, no papers, no power. Just the sound of a door closing behind them. Ava visited my grave a week later, left a single white rose, and a folded piece of paper with one sentence. "You were not invisible." She stayed for a while, sat in silence, like I used to, like I taught her to. And for the first time in years, someone missed me for exactly who I was, not what I had. Let them tell their version of the story. Let them blame me. Let them spin the ending. It won't matter. Because when the casket closed, my silence spoke louder than all their empty words combined. They didn't speak on the way home. The letter sat between them, unfolded, red, heavy. David gripped the wheel too tightly. Marlene stared out the window like the sky had betrayed her. "She planned this," Marlene finally said. Flat, cold, almost in awe. David didn't answer, because deep down, he knew. Back home, the silence followed them in. The same house that once echoed with ambition now sat like a stage after the curtain falls. No audience, no applause, just two people who didn't realize the play had ended. Marlene opened the liquor cabinet, poured something brown and angry. "She gave everything away," she whispered. "To strangers." David sat down, hard, like gravity was personal. He looked around the room, the rug, the couch, the bookshelf filled with framed photos, all of them taken before Eleanor got sick, before he stopped showing up, before he started checking account balances more than pulse rates. He stood up suddenly. "I'll contest it." Marlene didn't look up. "You'll lose." Martin had already confirmed it. 3 witnesses, medical sign-off, handwritten notes in margins. It was airtight, unbreakable, just like Eleanor had been. Marlene finally turned to him. "You said she'd never do it. You said she was too weak." He didn't answer, because he'd said those words, over and over, louder than her silence. They tried, of course, called another lawyer, and another. Each one asked the same question. Did you take care of her? And every time David hesitated too long, they tried going to the house. It was already cleared out. Ava had helped. Volunteers from the charity came too, packed everything with care, every photo, every book, every trace. Gone. The keys no longer fit. The mailbox was empty. The garden was thriving. But not for them. Marlene's frustration turned sharp. She owed us something. But deep down, even she knew. You don't earn inheritance. You honor it. David sat at the kitchen table for hours that night, letter beside him, still unfolded. He read it again and again, not for hope, but for punishment. You stopped being my son the moment I became an obligation. That line cut deeper than the rest, because it was true. And truth doesn't go away when the money does. Weeks passed. They told friends she left everything to charity, like she always wanted. But their voices cracked when they said it, the kind of crack that comes with shame. At the office, David stopped talking. His co-workers noticed. His boss pulled him aside. You okay? David nodded. But nothing was okay, because he had nothing left to say. Marlene went shopping, expensive handbags, loud shoes, but the receipts never dulled the echo of what they didn't get, of what they never gave. One night, David walked into the garage, stood next to the old boxes, one labelled Mom. He opened it. Inside, a photo album, handwritten notes, a recipe for Eleanor's lemon cake, and a sticky note that said, If you're reading this, I hope you've learned to miss more than just things. He sat on the floor. For a long time. The album in his lap. The silence finally allowed in. Because money ends. But regret? Regret lingers. Eleanor's death didn't break them. It revealed them. It showed them the cost of convenience, of shortcuts, of not calling, of waiting too long. And it wasn't just about the house. It was about who they became when they thought no one was watching. But someone was. Ava stood in front of the building. It used to be a boarded-up shelter, cracked windows, peeling paint, forgotten. Now, it had a name, the Eleanor House. Inside, the floors were polished. The walls were warm, fresh beds, stocked pantries, and every room carried the quiet hum of hope. Women sat in circles. Some held children. Some held coffee. Some held silence, for now. They had come from pain, from silence, from homes that weren't safe. And now they had somewhere to go, because Eleanor made sure of it. Ava stood near the wall of names. Dozens of plaques, donors, volunteers, champions, but only one had a framed photo. Eleanor. She had given it all. The house, the land, the savings. She gave it not to blood, but to choice. To women who, like her, had been forgotten too soon. The foundation grew. The story spread. News articles, a podcast. One headline read, Dying woman leaves fortune to shelter after family tries to cut her out. It went viral. People shared it, cried over it, talked about their mothers, and then one day, a visitor came. He wore a dark coat, carried a letter, and a small, unmarked box. Ava met him at the door. David, she said quietly. He looked smaller than she remembered, not physically, but in spirit, like someone who lost more than money. I'd like to see it, he said. The place? Ava hesitated, then nodded. She showed him the kitchen, the library, the room named after Eleanor's favourite author. He said little, but his eyes moved slowly, softly, as if trying to see something he should have noticed sooner. Finally, they stood in front of the photo. His mother, younger, smiling, unapologetically herself. David took out the letter, handed it to Ava. "I found this," he said. "It's not for me anymore." Ava opened it later that night. Just 3 lines. "You were right. I didn't see her. Thank you for honoring her when we didn't." The twist. David made a donation. Anonymous. Quiet. No announcement. No photo op. Just a simple transfer of funds to the organization bearing her name. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. But it was a start. And Eleanor? She never knew how big her story would become. She never saw the doors that opened after she left. She never heard the voices say her name in gratitude. But she didn't need to, because her legacy was never about being remembered. It was about refusing to be erased. And now, her story lives here, in shelters, in whispered bedtime stories, in second chances, in you. If you felt this story, if it stirred something inside you, a memory, a regret, a lesson, hit that subscribe button. Because every week, we bring you real stories of strength, betrayal, justice, and unexpected revenge. Stories that prove the quietest voices often leave the loudest echoes. And Eleanor, she'll be echoing for years,